Immediately after hearing his reassurance, Mina mimicked him and laughed out loud. She teased Kafka for sounding like a comic book hero, which embarrassed him, and he told her not to tell their moms, as they loved to gossip. Even so, Mina was very grateful to him because, together, she wasn't afraid anymore. At that moment, she was standing before her entire Team 3. "Before anyone gets hurt, we need to get to the hospital quickly and eliminate the threat," she ordered. The alarms blared, urging people to evacuate and follow safety measures. At the hospital, Ichikawa told Kafka to smile to clear up the elderly man's misunderstanding. He complied, but ended up looking like a bloodthirsty monster, making the elderly man faint on the spot. Kafka rushed over to help the elderly man up, but even a light touch from him was enough to make the entire wall in the room crumble. The pressure even caused all the lights above to explode. The explosion caused patients from surrounding rooms to come out and see what was happening. Ichikawa hurriedly urged him to run away before the defenders arrived. Once again, Kafka applied too much force to open a window. As a result, the glass door and part of the wall shattered. His transformed body had incredible strength. Ichikawa quickly jumped down first, and Kafka followed immediately after. But Ichikawa landed on the roof of the lower floor, while Kafka leapt into the air. Tears streamed down his face out of fear. Now Kafka didn't know if he was still human or a monster. From his body, several eerie appendages emerged. There were tentacles and horrifying faces. To make matters worse, a tongue shot out from his mouth, forming another mouth that grabbed a bird and ate it alive. Fortunately, he quickly reverted to normal, but the terrifying aspect was that he couldn't control his body. Kafka suddenly felt an urgent need to urinate. However, there was no place below to relieve himself. It turned out this body released waste from the top. Kafka felt humiliated, not knowing where to hide his face. Trying to calm down and think, he realized that with this body, he could never become a defender. It happened just when he had resolved to pursue that dream again. Ichikawa noticed a safety barrier nearby and urged him to hide there. Kafka suddenly sensed something coming from underground. Sure enough, a signal went off, alerting them of another monster's arrival in the city. It was the same type of spider monster that had attacked them earlier in the afternoon. The monster had just appeared and was already wreaking havoc in a part of the city. A little girl was crying, sitting next to her mother, who was pinned under a large cabinet. The mother urged her daughter to run, but the girl refused, wanting to save her mother. However, the child wasn't strong enough to move the cabinet. At that moment, the terrifying monster appeared. The mother screamed for her daughter to run, but she stayed, wanting to stay with her mother. The giant monster swiped its hand, destroying the upper half of the house and making the girl scream in fear. Its eyes started darting around as it drooled, getting ready to attack the mother and daughter. The mother could only cry helplessly. At that moment, Kafka arrived and punched the monster, sending it flying. Kafka was shocked by his own incredible strength after the punch. He approached the girl to check if she was okay, but it only made her shrink back in fear. He tried to smile to appear friendly, but it just made her cry more. Kafka quickly lifted the cabinet to free the girl's mother, and Ichikawa caught up to him. Luckily, the mother was just unconscious, not seriously hurt. The spider monster returned, and this time, Kafka increased his power. He threw a mighty punch to test his strength. His entire body radiated a bright light. He delivered a punch that made the monster explode on the spot. Body parts flew everywhere. The sky turned crimson as it rained, staining everything red. This power must be handled with care around humans. Seeing the monster covered in blood terrified the girl, making her hide behind Ichikawa. Ichikawa approached to comfort her. "The guards will be here soon, so don't worry, we are leaving now." Just as he was walking away, the girl stammered, calling him Mr. Monster. "Thank you, Mr. Monster," the girl said. This reminded Kafka of when Mina thanked him. Back then, they used to run around the hill, training to wipe out monsters in the future. Kafka even imagined standing beside Mina, fighting a dragon monster. Once again, he realized something important. Feeling more determined, he told Ichikawa he couldn't give up just yet. "I have to be by her side," Kafka said. His head returned to its human form. A while later, Team 3 arrived and were stunned by the scene in front of them. Who took down the monster? they wondered. Mina approached the girl to ask what had happened. Remembering the monster's horrifying teeth, the girl trembled. Mina patted her head and reassured her, "Don't be scared, I'll get rid of all the monsters." The girl felt better, but still wanted to ask Mina for a favor. "Can you spare the kind monster? He saved my mom." 3 months had passed since Kafka first turned into a monster. He was designated as Monster Number 8, and the government still didn't know his whereabouts. He was the first monster to escape the Defense Force's hunt since its formation. He was still being hunted across Japan. At that moment, the results for the first round of the Defense Force exam were announced. Every year, Kafka took the test, and his colleagues always threw him a consolation party. This time, Ichikawa passed, and he excitedly ran to find his senpai to share the news. His co-workers in the room were all hoping Kafka would pass this year, as it was his last chance, and he had worked so hard. As soon as he found his senpai, Ichikawa excitedly said, "You passed the first round." But Kafka, still in his monster form, turned to face him, making Ichikawa give him a playful kick. Sometimes Kafka's monster form would slip out, either his face or his fangs showing. "Don't forget, you're a dangerous monster, wanted all over the country. You have to hide it well." Even though Kafka received the news that he passed the first round, he remained calm because he usually failed in the second round. "Don't worry," Kafka said. "I'll manage to hide this form and get through the second round." Unlike the first round, which only required paperwork and a written exam, the second round involved interacting with many Defense Force members. If he's discovered, he'll be attacked immediately. But despite that, Kafka decided to take the exam again, as this was his last chance at 32 years old. He took a drink, but with too much force, he transformed into his monster form. After Ichikawa left, Kafka sighed in relief for passing the first round. If he had failed, he wouldn't have been able to face his junior. 10 days later, it was time for the second round of the Defense Force exam. It was Ichikawa's first time seeing the Tachikawa branch base. It was much larger than he imagined, as it also housed the military police force. In case of an emergency, the Defense Force and military police would work together. So, if he transformed into a monster here, he would be killed immediately. Just then, a little girl called out, "Hey, Uncle!" Kafka finally turned around. He couldn't believe the girl was calling him Uncle. Kafka replied, "Hey, I'm only 32. But at that age, Ichikawa nearly had to call him Uncle too. The girl said, "Move that junk out of my parking spot." Even though there were plenty of other spots, she insisted on that one because her lucky number for the day was 5, so she had to park in spot 55. Kafka felt like teaching the girl a lesson, but she took matters into her own hands. The girl suddenly took off her jacket, causing Kafka to feel embarrassed and cover his face. But she was just activating the suit she wore underneath her jacket. With one hand, she lifted the huge car Kafka had borrowed from the company and tossed it aside. Contestant number 2016, Kikoru, with a hobby of killing monsters. She suddenly approached Kafka, sniffed him and remarked, "You smell like a monster."